I want to welcome everyone to the hearing today. I'm going to ask we got to read the docket. I asked Mr. Stark to read the docket.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I had to get out of my night hearing mode into day hearing mode.
Mr. Chairman, the proceeding before us in docket number 2019-2E concerns the annual review of base rates for fuel costs for South Carolina Electric and Gas Company. This hearing has been scheduled for Wednesday, April 3rd in the offices of the Commission at 101 Executive Center Drive in Columbia, South Carolina, 29210. Mr. Chairman, the docket is in order.
Thank you. We'll take appearances now from the parties.
Good morning, Chairman Randall and members of the Commission. My name is Matthew Gissendanner, and I am Corporate Counsel for SC&G. With me today is Mr. Chad Burgess, who is also Corporate Counsel for SC&G, and Mr. Mitch Willoughby of the law firm Willoughby & Hafer. Together we represent SC&G. It is our pleasure to appear before you this morning, and we appreciate the opportunity to present the company's case. Thank you.
Who's next? So, Mr. Witt. Thank you, sir. Welcome. Energy users. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Scott Elliott.
Welcome, welcome. Coastal Conservation League, Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Lauren Bowen from Southern Environmental Law Center here today on behalf of South Carolina Coastal Conservation League, Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and with me is my colleague, Will Cleveland.
Welcome. Thank you. ORS.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Nelson for the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any preliminary matters that we need to deal with? You know, I've noticed that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, ORS would like to offer into the record, as I believe the first hearing exhibit, the stipulation that was filed yesterday between ORS, SC&G, and the South Carolina energy users. I apologize for the lateness of this. We always try to get such things filed a week out. However, based on what all had happened over the last several days as far as what the issues were going to be here, that delayed our getting that executed and filed with the Commission.
Okay, we will enter the stipulation as hearing exhibit number 1. Okay, anything else?
Mr. Chairman, as a result of the agreement between SC&G and CCL and SACE with respect to the testimonies of Mr. Lander and Mr. Call, SC&G hereby withdraws its motion to strike certain portions of the direct testimony of Mr. Lander, and I assume that Ms. Bowen or Ms. Cleveland will move his testimony into the record at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's done. Anything else? Then let's proceed.
SC&G calls George Lippert and Henry Delk to the stand. Good morning, gentlemen. I'll start with you, Mr. Lippert. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Press that button on your microphone and get that red light. And there you go.
There we go.
There we are.
Hold it. Sorry,
Yeah.
Commissioner Randall.
That's all right.
My name is George A. Lippert III.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by South Carolina Electric and Gas Company.
And have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your direct supervision and pre-filed in this docket direct testimony consisting of 7 pages?
Yes, sir, I have.
And do you have any corrections or changes of your testimony?
No, sir, I do not.
And if I ask you all the questions contained in your testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, we move into the evidence of record, the pre-filed direct testimony of George Lippard as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Lippard's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lippard, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, sir, I have.
Would you please deliver it at this time?
I would be happy to. Good morning, Chairman Randall and other members of the Commission. The purpose of my testimony today is to review with you the operating performance of the VC Summer Nuclear Station, Unit 1, during the period from January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018. SC&G's primary objective at Summer Station is always safe operation, and the company strives for excellence in all phases of operation of the facility. Furthermore, our business objectives are focused on maintaining a competitive production cost for the generation of electricity using nuclear fuel. I am pleased to report to you that Summer Station performed well during the review period with a net capacity factor based on reasonable, excludable nuclear system reductions of 102.26% and a gross generation output of 7,665,652 megawatt hours. During the review period, Summer Station experienced one planned outage. With regard to the planned outage, Summer Station was shut down on October 5th, 2018, to conduct the unit's 24th refueling outage, which lasted approximately 51 days and was completed with no nuclear safety events. During the scheduled outage, SC&G met all technical objectives and completed scheduled maintenance activities. More specifically, approximately one-third of Summer Station's 157 fuel assemblies were replaced, and scheduled maintenance, including over 11,000 tasks, was completed successfully. SC&G also accomplished major tasks of performing an integrated leak rate test, detailed eddy current inspections of steam generator tubes, replacement of 2 safety-related electrical inverters, and replacement of 3 feedwater regulating valve digital positioners. The unit was returned to service on November 25th, 2018. SC&G continuously meets or exceeds all Nuclear Regulatory Commission requirements and Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, or INPO, standards. During the reporting period, INPO, which is a nonprofit corporation promoting excellence in the nuclear generation industry, rated Summer Station's overall performance as strong. The NRC, which is responsible for the licensing and oversight of the civilian use of nuclear materials in the United States, reported that Summer Station operated in a manner that preserved public health and safety and fully met all cornerstone objectives. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Lippard. I'll now turn to you, Mr. Delk. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Sir, my name is Henry E. Delk, Jr.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
South Carolina Electric and Gas Company. I'm General Manager of Fossil Hydro Operations.
And have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your direct supervision and pre-filed in this docket amended direct testimony consisting of 11 pages?
Yes, sir, I have.
Do you have any changes or corrections required of your testimony?
I do not.
If I ask you all the questions contained in your direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, we'll move into the evidence of record, the pre-filed amended direct testimony of Henry Delk as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Delk's amended pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Delk, do you have any exhibits attached to your amended direct testimony?
Yes, I do.
And are there any changes or corrections required of that exhibit?
No, they are not.
Mr. Chairman, we move into the record the next hearing exhibit, the pre-filed exhibit identified as HED1, and ask that that be marked and included in the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Delk's pre-filed exhibit HED1 will be entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Delk, have you prepared a summary of your amended direct testimony?
Yes, Yes, I have.
Would you please deliver it out at this time?
Certainly. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. The purpose of my testimony is to review the operating performance of our fossil hydro units from January 1, 2018 through December 31, 2018. The company's fossil hydro fleet of 4,994 megawatts consists of coal and gas-fired steam units, combined cycle units, peaking turbines, hydroelectric facilities, and a pump storage facility. Changes to the makeup of the fossil hydro fleet during the review period included the purchase of the 540 megawatt Columbia Energy Center, a combined cycle gas turbine steam generator located in Calhoun County, and the sale of the 85 megawatt Capstone biomass generator located at the Capstone facility in North Charleston. During the review period, the fossil hydro units operated efficiently and dependably with an availability factor of 83.48% and a forced outage factor of 0.51%. With respect to heat rate performance of our coal-fired units, our average of 10,045 BTU per kilowatt hour compares favorably with the national average for heat rate from 2017 for all coal-fired units of 10,476 BTU per kilowatt hour, with Cope Station having the best heat rate on our system at 9,635 BTU per kilowatt hour. During the review period, and as detailed in my pre-filed testimony, the company completed successful planned outages at Williams Station, Urquhart Station, Jasper Station, Cope Station, Columbia Energy Center, and on Saluda Hydro Unit numbers 1 and 2. We define forced outages as those lasting for more than 7 days, and I'm very pleased to report that during the review period, our fossil hydro units did not experience a significant forced outage. In summary, our fossil hydro fleet has operated reliably and efficiently during the review period. Thank you for your time. This completes the summary of my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Delk. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lippert and Mr. Delk are available for cross-examination as well as any questions by the commissioners.
Thank you. I know there have been some talk or agreements on cross, but I'm going to ask for cross. I'm not going to call the roll every time, and if you feel the urge and need to do that, just stand right up and we'll get it done. So any cross for these gentlemen. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Howard.
Good morning. Mr. Lepard, you talked about your outage number 24.
Yes, sir.
50 days or 51 days. Is that average, above average, or what is an average outage?
An average outage in the nuclear industry runs between 35 and 40 days. This outage, although the actual duration was 50.8 days, it was actually scheduled for 52 days because we had some significant inspections that we only do every third outage that we had to do this outage. In the future, we'll be trying to drive our outage durations down to commensurate with industry standards, which are in the 35 to 40-day range.
You mentioned 3 or 4 things you did. Is that what you're talking about when you're saying the third outage?
The inspections of the steam generator U-tubes is something that we only do every third outage, which is about once every 4.5 years. That's an industry requirement and an NRC requirement. We have 3 steam generators, so instead of doing 1 each outage, we do all 3 every third outage, and it saves cost and duration because we're only mobilizing the vendor 1 time instead of 3 times.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Belser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Delk. I noticed you said your forced outage factor for the review period was 0.15%. Is that correct? I believe it was in your summary.
0.51%, yes.
Sorry, 0.51. Okay. Were there forced outages, or were there? It seemed to me there seemed to be extensions of planned outages, not necessarily unplanned or forced outages that weren't planned. Is that?
That's correct.
I'm making myself clear on that.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the term we would call that would not put those in the forced outage category is we brought units down for a planned outage, and while we found some additional work that was necessary, that outage extended beyond the planned time frame, but that's a planned outage extension and not a forced outage.
Okay. So,
The unit wasn't forced offline. We planned to bring it offline to make repairs.
is this factor for a forced outage or for those extensions? Is
That would simply be for the forced outages on our system.
okay? On page 10 of your testimony, where you were comparing the system's availability to the NERC national 5-year averages, it strikes me, has there been any trend that E&G's noticed on its system that would affect the availability that might indicate the need for future capital improvements, future plants?
I think we take the necessary capital improvements. Are you talking about with the availability number being a little lower?
A little lower.
Yeah, and I think that's because we had some extended outages last year on our fleet. ERCOT 3, the Columbia Energy Center, we bought that in May. We had an extended outage in the fall, and when you add up extended outages that are planned to take care of a lot of necessary work, that's going to drive your availability number lower. So the fact that we had several of those throughout the 2018 year, I would expect that number to maybe be better in a year when you did not have so many planned long outages. Cope was another example last year, a very long outage, and all of those stacked up within the same year.
Well, it did seem that there were a lot of planned outages. Is that normal? I mean, for the various units, it just seemed to be more than what I've seen.
Yes, we plan outages every year. We plan outages for the spring and the fall. We go into our units on a periodic basis based upon the OEM recommendations. It's typically every 6 years for our turbine overhauls. Last year, the unit 3 at ERCOT, for example, that outage had gone beyond the normal 6-year period because a few years ago that unit was on the retirement list. However, with the changes in the company and the need to continue to operate that unit, we went forward and completed an outage last year that was really probably 3 years later than we would have, and it just happened to stack that up along with the outages at Cope. We bought Columbia Energy Center. That outage was needed and was planned last year, so they kind of just all stacked up on top of one another.
But y'all are still on schedule. It's not.
Yes,
it's not
absolutely.
like anything kind of got off schedule.
No, we're absolutely on schedule, and it's a lot of work to have that many outages. We really don't prefer to do that many large scale outages in 1 year because it's a stress on all of our employees doing that much work in a 1 year period. So we plan that out. We look out 10 years at the needs for our system, and we actually map out when major outages are going to occur, and we try to stagger those outages so that they don't all stack up, say, in the same season.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Delk, regarding the Columbia Energy Center, has that acquisition, gone smoothly?
Yes, sir. I would say it's going very smoothly. We bought what we feel is a very good unit, and along with that unit, the employees who came over with that unit have just really meshed well with our culture. They are helping us learn some things the way they do it. We're taking that to our other sister units like Jasper and ERCOT. And in fact, we have a meeting tomorrow where we're bringing all of those folks together to compare issues that we've done through the fleet and just try to learn from each other. So I would say it's going very smoothly.
Okay, good. Does the company anticipate the Columbia Energy Center to need any major deferred maintenance in the near or midterm future?
I don't think so. We had a major outage down there. We went through all 3 of the units, both gas turbines and the steam turbine, and it was a good inspection for us, having just purchased it. We made some major repairs then, and we believe that unit is in really good condition. We'll continue to watch as we operate the unit, and it'll be melded into our maintenance plans to execute on necessary maintenance items in the future.
And you may have answered this already. If you did, I just want to make sure that I understand that the major outages during the test period, did you anticipate those before the Columbia Energy Center was acquired?
At the other units or at Columbia Energy Center?
At Columbia Energy Center.
Yes, sir. We actually, within our purchase agreement for that, that outage was actually planned on the unit before we acquired it. The company we purchased the unit from was unable to get it executed, so we were actually given an allowance to actually, in the purchase agreement, to complete that outage after ownership transferred.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
It was planned, and then we executed it after the purchase.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions for you. Good to have both of you with us again today. Mr. Lippert, Commissioner Howard asked you about, you just had an exchange with him about the length of the outage lasting 50 days, and y'all discussed that. I want to ask you a little bit about the frequency. I know Unit 1, of course, has always been designed for an 18-month, and I know had Units 2 and 3 come online, I think those would have gone 24 months. I guess going forward, you're obviously going to have to stay on the same frequency cycle your own. And could you talk a little bit about maybe, and of course I know you've had replacement generation sources like Columbia Energy, but could you talk about any readjustments you might have had to make in future years, IRP, staying on this frequency?
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to, Commissioner Whitfield. The current plan is to stay on the 18-month cycle. We had a fall outage in 2018. That means we do not have a refueling outage this year in 2019. Our next outage is scheduled for spring of 2020. So there is.
So in next year's fuel case, we won't be discussing an outage.
I hope we won't. We won't be discussing a planned outage.
A planned one, yes, sir.
So, when you design a core, you have to, unlike a coal plant where you can batch feed your fuel, you have to determine what the fuel cycle is going to look like several cycles in advance. So it would require a licensing change for us to go to 24-month cycles. It wouldn't be just simply we add more fuel. We would have to get NRC approval to do that. Since VC Summer is part of the Dominion fleet now, and Dominion owns 2 nuclear sites in Virginia and 1 in Connecticut, I can tell you that there is, excuse me, sir, I can tell you that there is an effort to look at the nuclear fleet and determine whether it would be feasible or licensable to go to 24-month cycles. But for the near future, VC Summer will stay on 18-month cycles.
Do you know how involved that process is with NRC or what it would take should you go down that path?
It's quite extensive. Many years ago, probably 20, I'm going to guess about 20, 25 years ago, we actually did an uprate of VC Summer from 2,775 thermal megawatts to 2,900 megawatts. So it wouldn't be quite as extensive as uprating the output of the plant. The output of the plant would stay at its current value, but you would be able to run, you wouldn't run out of gas as quickly. You would be able to run for another 6 months. But loading that much energy into a nuclear core would be something that we would have to get approval from the NRC. And it would be, the advantage now is being part of a nuclear fleet with Dominion Energy. We wouldn't be embarking on that study by ourselves.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lippert. You talked about the value and the uprate in years past, about 20 years ago. You testified this time in this case that VC Summer's gross generation output was 7,665,652 megawatt hours during this review period. Could you talk a little bit about how that compares with previous years?
Well, since we only had one period where we were offline, and that was for the scheduled outage, I can tell you that it was not a record because we have had shorter outages. Probably the best outage that we've ever had is in the neighborhood of 34 days. So if you had an 18-month period or a calendar year where you had a shorter outage, you would have more gross generation. The only other time that VC Summer was not at 100% power, we do quarterly tests of our turbine control valves, which requires us to come down to 90% for about 12 hours in order to do that test. And then we had a failure of a feed water pump control card that required us to come down to 90% power for a few days. Otherwise, the unit ran at 100% power for the entire year, save the required testing intervals, the feed water pump, couple-day outage, and the refueling outage. So it was a good performing year, but it was not a record year.
Not a record.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lippert. And Mr. Delt, one quick question for you, not to leave you out. I know Commissioner Williams asked you about the Columbia Energy Center, of course, a large addition, 540 megawatts to your generation. I want to ask you about a smaller one. You also sold the biomass generator at Capstone, the paper mill down there at Charleston, 85 megawatts. And I think that contract ran out December 31. And I know you're only a few months into it, but how is that working with you all being the backup supplier, and how is that new arrangement working now that the company doesn't own that smaller generation of 85 megawatts?
I guess from our standpoint, it's really no impact. We added 540, we lost 85, so I'd say it's sort of transparent to us.
You still, of course, have to plan for that demand for them.
Yes, sir. That's mixed in with our total demand on our system, and we serve all the load, and it really doesn't impact the day-to-day operation. We're going to serve that 85 just like we serve the rest of the load, whatever. If it's 2,500 today or 4,000 tomorrow morning, whatever the load is. I can't say that I've seen
the difference.
Impact.
Well, I knew you all had mentioned that to us in last year's fuel proceeding, and I see that it's now transpired. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? Any redirect? Thank you, gentlemen, and you may step down and be excused.
Mr. Shin, could you please state your name for the record?
Michael Davis Shin.
And by whom are you employed, and in what capacity?
I'm employed by South Carolina Electric and Gas as the General Manager of Fuel Procurement and Asset Management.
And Mr. Shin, have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision direct testimony of 21 pages that was previously filed with the Commission in this docket?
I have.
And do you have any changes or additions to your pre-filed direct testimony?
I do not.
If I ask you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I move that the pre-filed direct testimony of Michael Shin be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Shin's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shin, have you also prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision an exhibit labeled as exhibit number MDS-1 that was previously filed with the Commission as an attachment to your pre-filed direct testimony in this docket?
I did.
And do you have any changes or additions to your exhibit?
I do not.
Mr. Chairman, I would also move into the record as the next hearing exhibit the exhibit attached to Mr. Shin's direct testimony and labeled as exhibit number MDS-1.
Mr. Shin's exhibit MDS-1 will be entered as hearing exhibit number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shin, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
I have.
Would you please share that with us at this time?
Be happy Good morning, Chairman Randall and members of the Commission. In my testimony, I described the procurement and delivery activities for fossil fuel used in electric generation for SC&G and GenCo's Williams Station for the period January 1st of 2018 through December 31st of 2018. The Fuel Procurement Department purchases all necessary coal, fuel oil, limestone, and associated transportation for SC&G's fossil plants, focusing on reliability of supply, operational and environmental requirements, and securing reasonable prices. Coal is procured with long-term and spot purchase agreements to achieve a balance of reliable supplies and flexibility to react to market changes or short-term system needs. Fuel oil inventories are purchased to ensure adequate backup to natural gas for SC&G's intermediate and peaking generators and for startup of fossil fuel generation. In 2018, SC&G consumed 3,340,199 tons of coal in the production of electricity for its customers, which was within 0.16% of the coal consumed in 2017. SC&G projects that the burn rate for coal in 2019 will be approximately 2.6 million tons. In addition to utilizing competing rail companies to take advantage of transportation savings when available, SC&G diversifies its coal supply and transportation with import coal purchases when prices are competitive and by purchasing lower quality coal where practical and acceptable. During the review period, SC&G executed a new contract with CSX that began on March 1st, 2018 and provided significant reductions in the cost of freight. The company's long-term contract with the Norfolk Southern Railway Company expired on June 30th of 2018 and was not renewed. During the review period, 67.88% of the company's coal purchases were taken through long-term agreements and 32.12% were taken through spot purchases. For 2019, the company anticipates soliciting suppliers of coal for additional long-term contracts and currently has long-term contracts with 7 suppliers for delivery of 65.01% of the forecasted total receipts. The company also has spot contracts with 7 suppliers for the delivery of 15.81% of its expected coal receipts. The remaining 19.18% will be heavily dependent on weather and generation produced at the company's other generating assets. Delivered fuel oil prices during the review period range from a low of $14.31 per million BTU in March of 2018 to a high of $22.10 per million BTU in February of 2018. SC&G currently is emitting less than its EPA-provided SO2 and NOx emission allowances and was not required to purchase SO2 and NOx emission allowances during the review period. The company also secured adequate and reliable supplies of limestone for SO2 reduction. With regard to nuclear fuel, short-term and long-term prices for uranium conversion and enrichment services have remained stable and are anticipated to continue to remain stable for both short-term and long-term pricing. In summary, during the review period, the Fuel Procurement Department's efforts were reasonable and prudent as it obtained reliable, high-quality supplies of fuel and transportation for SC&G's customers and its electric system at reasonable prices. Therefore, on behalf of SC&G, I respectfully request that the Commission find that the company's fuel purchasing practices were reasonable and prudent for this review period. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Shin. Mr. Call, would you please state your name for the record?
James Darren Call.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
At SCANA Services as Manager of Gas Supply and Asset Management.
And have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision amended direct testimony of 9 pages that was previously filed with the Commission in this docket?
Yes, I have.
And do you have any changes or additions to your pre-filed amended direct testimony?
No, I do not.
If I ask you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I move that the pre-filed amended direct testimony of Darren Call be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Call's pre-filed amended direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Call, have you also prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision 2 exhibits labeled as exhibit numbers JDK1 and JDK2 that were previously filed with the Commission as attachments to your pre-filed amended direct testimony in this docket?
Yes, I have.
And do you have any changes or additions to your exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, I would also move into the record as the next hearing composite exhibit the exhibits attached to Mr. Call's amended direct testimony and labeled as exhibit numbers JDK1 and JDK2.
Mr. Call's two exhibits, JDK1 and JDK2, will be entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Call, have you prepared a summary of your amended direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Please share that with us at this time.
Sure. Good morning, Chairman Randall and members of the Commission. On behalf of SCE&G, I'm appearing before you today to provide information about the natural gas purchasing process for SCE&G generation and to discuss natural gas prices for the review period of January 1, 2018 through December 31, 2018, and the outlook for natural gas prices in the near term. The gas purchases made by the Gas Supply Department are driven by the needs of the Electric Generation Group. Our department provides SCE&G's Economic Resource Commitment Group, or ERC, with current market information that can be used in the electric generation dispatch modeling to determine the most economic means of reliably meeting the electric needs of our customers. Once ERC decides that natural gas is the economical choice for providing reliable power to our customers, our department is directed to purchase gas supplies for delivery with a stated term and volume at the best available current market prices. Prices in the NYMEX natural gas commodity market began the review period at $3.03 per decatherm. An early cold January pushed the commodity spot price above $7 per decatherm on its highest day, and the delivered market for Transco Zone 5 traded at a high mark of $150 per decatherm. Early February saw an abrupt end to extreme winter temperatures, allowing prices to rapidly fall to $2.53 per decatherm mid-February, the low for the year. The remainder of the winter and summer saw prices trade in a range from the $2.50 range to mid-330s, as lower than average national storage levels made it difficult for the market to trade lower. Entering the winter season, the national storage level was at a 15-year low and 16% below the 5-year average for November 1. An early winter cold front, coupled with these lower storage levels, drove an increase in market prices, topping out at the year's high of approximately $4.93 on November 14th. Prices remained above $4 until mid-December, when a warm last half of the month allowed prices to retreat, finishing the year at $2.94 per decatherm. The near-term forecast indicates natural gas prices are likely to average near $3 per decatherm as the winter period comes to a close. However, short-term price volatility can result from dramatic changes in either supply or demand components. Energy analysts continue to forecast relatively stable gas prices in the $3 per decatherm to $4 per decatherm range over the next 3 to 5 years. In conclusion, I respectfully request that the Commission find that the SCE&G's natural gas purchasing practices for electric generation were reasonable and prudent. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Call. Mr. Call, have you also prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision rebuttal testimony of 18 pages that was previously filed with the Commission in this docket?
Yes, I have.
And do you have any changes or additions to your pre-file rebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
If I ask you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I move that the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Darren Call be read into the record as if given orally from the stand. I would also note for the record that there is a public version and a confidential version of Mr. Call's rebuttal testimony, and we would ask that the confidential version be maintained under seal consistent with the hearing examiner directive issued yesterday.
Okay, Mr. Call's pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand, and the confidential version will be held under seal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Call, have you also prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision an exhibit labeled as exhibit number JDK3 that was previously filed with the Commission as an attachment to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any changes or additions to your exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, I would also move into the record as the next hearing exhibit, the exhibit attached to Mr. Call's rebuttal testimony and labeled as exhibit number JDK3.
Mr. Call's Exhibit JDK3 will be entered as hearing exhibit number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Call, have you prepared a summary of your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please share that with us at this time?
In my rebuttal testimony, I discuss SCE&G's response to the direct testimony of Mr. George Lander. In the interest of time, I would refer the Commission to my pre-filed rebuttal testimony for a complete discussion of SCE&G's position on the issues raised by witness Lander. Generally, Mr. Lander criticizes both the Transco Southeastern Trail and Mountain Valley Pipeline precedent agreements and argues that they, quote, will not provide value to the ratepayer, end quote. As an initial matter, there are no costs associated with the Transco Southeastern Trail or Mountain Valley Pipeline precedent agreements included in this fuel proceeding. With that said, and contrary to Mr. Lander's position, both the Transco Southeastern Trail and Mountain Valley Pipeline precedent agreements are reasonable and prudent contracts that provide value to SCE&G and its customers. It is a well-known and uncontroversial proposition that contracting for firm capacity provides substantial reliability benefits compared to purchasing large volumes of supply and firm transportation capacity on the daily spot market. However, Mr. Lander asserts that although SCE&G could fully utilize the capacity provided for in both agreements, it should not do so because it, quote, can continue to purchase day-ahead and intraday gas as it has in the past, and it can supplement either or both by using ICE to accomplish these objectives, end quote. However, Mr. Lander's assumptions that the trading activity, that is, the volume and number of trades necessary to satisfy SCE&G's significant need for natural gas supply and transportation capacity on a daily basis, would be possible without any reliability concerns or pricing risks is simply not credible. Mr. Lander's conclusions also ignore the penalties or higher other fuel-related costs that the company could incur in the event that it could not find supplies and transportation capacity needed on a daily basis to reliably operate its generating facilities. Such penalties or higher other fuel-related costs resulting from Mr. Lander's, quote, roll-the-dice strategy would exceed within days any perceived cost associated with the precedent agreements that Mr. Lander identifies in his figures 6 and 7. Further, Mr. Lander's conclusions also ignore the real possibility that the company may not be able to serve its customers during peak times if it employed his recommended strategy. The company does not believe that it is either reasonable or prudent to subject its system and its customers to the reliability issues experienced in the Northeast in recent years. In short, Mr. Lander's recommendations with the Transco Southeastern Trail and Mountain Valley Pipeline precedent agreements should be rejected in totality. Mr. Lander also recommends that the Commission disallow certain annual fixed reservation fees paid by SCE&G to Scana Energy Marketing pursuant to a gas supply agreement dated April 2, 2004. However, the Commission approved the gas supply agreement by order number 2007-273 dated May 18, 2007 and docket number 2004-126-E. As such, SCE&G's fixed reservation fees paid pursuant to the terms of the gas supply agreement are reasonable and prudent and appropriate for recovery in this fuel proceeding. Mr. Lander's criticisms of the gas supply agreement are based on his misreading of that agreement. Despite that the plain language of that gas supply agreement indicates that it is for firm gas supply, Mr. Lander opines that he, quote, doesn't think, end quote, the contract is really a firm contract because, quote, ultimately discretion over the actual scheduled amounts, end quote, belongs to Scana Energy Marketing and not SCE&G. To support his position that has no basis in reality, Mr. Lander attempts to create ambiguity where none exists. During the review period, the gas supply agreement had a very high and significant utilization rate, demonstrating its value to SCE&G customers, and on no occasion did Scana Energy Marketing fail to schedule natural gas, which SCE&G had nominated pursuant to the terms of that agreement. Simply put, the gas supply agreement was a firm supply agreement when it was approved by the Commission in 2007 and remains so today. No language in that gas supply agreement gives Scana Energy Marketing any discretion over the actual scheduled volumes amounts whatsoever. For these reasons and others stated in my direct testimony, Mr. Lander's recommendations with respect to the gas supply agreement should also be rejected in totality. This concludes the summary of my rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Call. Mr. Chairman, at this time I present Mr. Shin and Mr. Call to the parties for cross-examination and to the Commission for questioning. I would note that in exchange for SC&G agreeing to stipulate Mr. Lander's testimony, CCL and SACE have also agreed to forego cross-examination of Mr. Call. And one other thing that I would point out, to the extent that there's any questioning of Mr. Call related to the confidential matters in his rebuttal testimony, we would just request that the courtroom be cleared except for those parties that have executed a confidentiality agreement and the ORS.
Okay. Any cross for these witnesses?
Chairman Randall, I just wanted to confirm that Mr. Gissendanner is absolutely correct. That as part of our efforts in working with the company to streamline these proceedings, we have in fact agreed to waive cross-examination of Mr. Call. They've agreed to waive cross-examination of our witness, Mr. Lander. He will not be taking the stand. I'll be moving his testimony in later. But I just wanted the record to reflect that although we are not cross-examining Mr. Call, we do stand by Mr. Lander's testimony, and I didn't want the Commission to think that we withdrew any of our positions in this case. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cleveland. Any other cross? Commissioners? Mr. Williams. Oh, I just saw your light on, sorry. Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I welcome you two gentlemen today. Mr. Sheehan, on page 11 of your pre-file testimony, you discuss a new contract executed with CSX. Was this a long-term contract, short-term?
It was 3 years.
3 years.
Yes,
and how was cost reduction the reason for the new contract, or the old one that expired?
Well, an old one had expired, and we had also, during the time frame in 2017 and before that, had executed a contract with the Norfolk Southern. And one thing that led to the new contract and the lower rates was a greater, I guess, we took more tons off the CSX. We guaranteed them more tons and more revenue.
So it'd be a long-term saving.
That's right, sir.
And what reason did you see not to renew the Norfolk Southern contract?
CSX directly serves all three of our plants, but they also have the sole service to two of them. So basically, in the negotiations, what happened is the CSX was able to negotiate and tie lower savings if they were able to get more tonnage to the plants that only they serve.
So you see no problem with canceling the other contract?
No, sir. No, sir. We will still have Norfolk Southern access into North Watery is the one that has dual access. We also maintain suppliers that can load on both railroads. So we do have the capacity to switch back and forth if needed. If, say, for instance, the CSX has any kind of reliability issue.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Belzer.
Good morning. This is for Mr. I'm going to say your last name wrong. Call. Thank you very much. I'm actually looking at your public version of your rebuttal so that I don't say anything that I shouldn't. But on page 8, you state, because of the acquisition of the Columbia Energy Center and the expiration of the gas supply contract by its own terms, as of April 30th, 2019, SCE&G will need an additional amount of supply sourced upstream capacity. And have y'all arranged for contracts to meet that additional demand?
Yes, ma'am, we have.
And who are those contracts with?
With Transco, the Southeastern Trail Project, would be providing the capacity to be able to serve that facility as well as the other portion of the Jasper contract or the Jasper facility.
Okay, so it's the Jasper contract and Columbia Energy that needs that additional capacity.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Howard.
Thank you. Mr. Shen, my memory serves me correct. Several years ago, you had a hard time negotiating with CSX.
Yes, sir.
To the point that I think there was a lawsuit involved or something like that. Then there was conversation about you purchasing coal cars to alleviate the shortage. It seems to me like you're going in and putting all your eggs into one basket with CSX because Watery was the only one that had fuel capacity for both rail lines. You comment on the negotiation and why it seems to be going so smoothly now versus several years ago?
My opinion as to why things might be different. Number one, compared to how much coal that was burned years ago, is significantly different today than it was then. So the railroads are competing for a more limited amount of business than what they used to. And I would think that would probably be the main driver. And coal shipments are actually one of their higher revenue moves. So to be able to, I guess, secure more of those for their company certainly helps out with their revenue.
Did you buy coal cars?
We lease them. We do a full-term lease. We do not actually purchase them.
Do you still do that? I mean,
we still do that.
Touch briefly, and I'll emphasize the word briefly, on the international market. Several years ago, you had barges coming into, I guess, Charleston and Norfolk, wherever. And you touched on the international market in your testimony, but why is it still a viable option, or what? Talk to me about the international market, I guess.
Sure. Kinder Morgan terminals in Charleston is where we would probably bring in any international coal. And if we were going to do it on a long-term, I guess long-term more than a year or so, then we would actually have to install equipment there to load it into barges and move it. But right now, they have the capacity to unload ships and stockpile coal. And anything we might bring in there, we'd truck up to Williams Station. But right now, the international market is such where it's not really economical to bring it in and do that all the way up to Williams Station. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Call, I wanted to ask you whether the company has recognized any benefits from purchasing additional gas from Dominion Carolina Gas Transmission.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Can you repeat that?
Well, I believe that the company is purchasing additional natural gas from Dominion.
We have capacity on the Dominion Energy pipeline, yes.
Right. Has that been beneficial, or is it too soon to tell?
The capacity, we utilize that capacity every day to serve both for the generation facilities that are behind the pipeline. So McMeekin Station, Cope, sometimes Williams, we use that capacity. Jasper is the biggest plant that we have. We utilize those capacities on that pipeline.
Are there other sources of natural gas that you look at?
So, the Carolina Gas Transmission is not directly connected to any fuel source. So we rely on upstream capacities such as Southern Natural Gas Pipeline to feed into the Carolina Gas Transmission system, as well as the Transcontinental Gas Pipeline, or Transco. And then, excuse me, also the Elba Express Pipeline can feed into the Carolina Gas Transmission system down there towards at your Elba Island, Port Wentworth area.
So do you use some kind of bidding process to acquire the gas?
The gas supply, just the gas supply itself? Yes, sir. We on a daily basis, routine basis, when the Economic Resource Commitment Group wants to run the plants, whether it's daily or for longer term, we'll be in contact with suppliers, various suppliers that range anywhere from producers to marketers. And we go out there and we basically bid that out. We get comparative prices, and then we ultimately report those prices back to the Economic Resource Commitment Group, and then they in turn make a decision based on those prices if it's the right choice for economics to run those facilities on that gas price.
What do you normally go with the low bidder, or are there other factors that you consider?
There are those factors. Some of it times it depends on the location, the supply locations. In certain instances, we may or may not be able to get access to that supply component. So in that case, we have to go to the source that we have capacity available to pull that gas across the pipeline and into the Carolina gas system. So sometimes it's not necessarily the lowest price, but sometimes it depends on the origination point of that gas supply.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay. Mr. Shin, just one on page 19 and 20. Is it Cameco?
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure I pronounce that right. Okay, so you've got a dispute, and I was reading this. So if you lose this dispute on nuclear fuel, what do you do with the excess fuel if you've got to take it?
It would just go into inventory.
Just hanging. Are they disputing? I know it's you disputed in 16 and then disputed again in 17. Are they disputing both of those, or is it just one of them?
It actually started in 2017 is when we were eligible to start reducing the amount of offtake.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is when the dispute actually started.
Okay, so it just in 17 was the first time it started happening.
Yeah, and it's
okay, and that was okay. I got you.
There were certain notifications that had to be done in 16 for 17. So
got it. Okay, that makes sense. So I know you contract out you have to contract way ahead on nuclear fuel. How far out do you contract?
Industry, it can go anywhere from 5 to 10 years. I think right now 5 years is kind of the industry standard.
Do you know the cost of the disputes, the fuel disputes, the contracts that are under dispute, I guess?
Yes, sir. If we were to, it would go completely in Cameco's favor. We estimate it could be $130 million as compared to the current market.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Any redirect? Okay. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony this morning, and you may step down and be excused.
Mr. Raftery, would you please state your name for the record?
John Howard Raftery.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am employed by SCANA Services as the Director of Rates and Regulatory. At the time of my direct testimony, I was the General Manager of Renewable Products and Services in Energy Demand Management for SC DN.
And Mr. Raftery, have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision direct testimony of 21 pages that was previously filed with the Commission in this docket?
Yes, I did.
And subject to the update of your position, do you have any changes or additions to your pre-filed testimony?
No, I do not.
And so if I ask you, subject to the update of your position, if I ask you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I move that the pre-filed direct testimony of John Raftery be read into the record as if given orally from the stand, with the exception of the phrase, quote, the company's application of variable integration charges to solar developers, which is found on page 2, lines 13 through 14, and the testimony from page 13, line 3 to page 16, line 8. This testimony is not being entered into the record in this phase of the proceeding in compliance with Commission Order 2019-229. And I've provided the Commission and the court reporter and the parties with copies of that testimony where I have redacted that information.
Okay, well then Mr. Raftery's direct pre-file testimony as redacted and as amended, as stated by counsel, will be entered into the record, so given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Raftery, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Would you please share that with us at this time?
Sure. Good morning, Chairman Randall and members of the Commission. In my testimony, I discussed the performance of the Distributed Energy Resources, or DER, programs during the review period of January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018, and provide the costs associated with offering these DER programs during the review period, as well as DER program cost projections for the forecast period, January 1st, 2019 through April 30th, 2020. I also discussed the anticipated progress towards the 2% capacity cap for net energy metering and the company's communications plans to customers and solar installers once the 2% cap is reached, and the company's continued evaluations and plans to issue RFPs to invest in renewable energy facilities pursuant to South Carolina Code annotated Section 5839-130D. During the review period, SC&G offered customers a variety of solar programs approved by the Commission in Order Number 2015-512, including the interconnection of the first 14 megawatts of the 16-megawatt community solar DER program. As a result of these efforts, the balance of the DER program costs at the end of the review period totaled an over-recovery of $1,856,462 in avoided costs and an under-recovery of $669,089 in incremental costs. For the period January 1st, 2019 through April 30th, 2020, the company projects that the DER program costs will include $9,426,377 in avoided costs and $25,558,588 in incremental costs. These costs include the avoided and incremental costs and general and administrative expenses associated with SC&G's approved DER programs. As reported during last year's fuel proceeding, the company has achieved the 1% goal for utility scale facilities and the 1% goal for customer scale facilities, each as set forth in Act 236. As of December 31st, 2018, SC&G had 9 utility scale solar farms totaling 48.16 megawatts interconnected as part of the company's approved DER program, and 8,883 customers participating in its customer scale DER programs. This customer participation represented approximately 87.08 megawatts of solar generating capacity on SC&G's system. With respect to community solar, Springfield Solar, a 6-megawatt facility in Orangeburg County, and Nemet Solar, an 8-megawatt facility in Jasper County, entered commercial operations in June of 2018. And I am pleased to report that Curry Solar, a 2-megawatt facility in Hampton County, entered commercial operations in February 2019. As of December 31st, 2018, 1,096 customers have either purchased or subscribed to 15.978 megawatts of the available 16 megawatts of community solar capacity. The remaining 0.022 megawatts of capacity is reserved for low-income customers and is filled via separate wait lists created by the marketing of SC&G, Clean Energy Collective, and 8 customer assistance agencies. In docket 2018-2-E, SC&G discussed its plans to issue RFPs for solar photovoltaic systems coupled with battery energy storage Over the past year, the company has gained valuable knowledge of the solar generator's impact to SCNG's grid through firsthand experience. As a result, SCNG has determined that focusing its efforts on evaluating other distributed energy resource technologies that further enable a more resilient and flexible grid is the appropriate path for the 1% utility scale investment contemplated in South Carolina Code Annotated Section 5839-130D at this time. SCNG has begun to model battery energy storage in its integrated resource planning and is exploring electric vehicle charging programs and anticipates issuing RFPs for these types of distributed energy resource solutions. SCNG also plans to issue an RFP for the first stage of a solar farm, battery energy storage, microgrid and emerging technologies, site prep at a site adjacent to the Lake Murray Training Center. My testimony also discusses communication plans to customers and solar installers regarding the 2% cap on net energy metering. At the time of filing my direct testimony, SCNG had forecasted that it would approach the 2% cap in April of 2019. As of March 31st, so just a few days ago, SCNG has achieved that cap. SCNG developed a communications plan in which notices were sent to users of its online application system, supporting systems less than 20 kW in size, individuals that had previously submitted interconnection applications to SCNG's transmission services group greater than 20 kW in size, and its DER advisory group established in Order 2015-512. These notices included the anticipated dates in which net energy metering applications will need to be submitted, fully completed, and approved in order to guarantee participation in the net energy metering program. In addition, both SCNG's traditional website as well as its Power Clerk application were updated with pertinent information on the cap schedule. These efforts were completed in February of this year. In summary, SCNG respectfully requests that the Commission approve the company's costs incurred in providing the DER programs during the review period as being reasonable and prudent. This concludes the summary of my direct testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Raftery. Mr. Rooks, would you please state your name for the record?
Alan W. Rooks.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Employed by SCANA Services as Manager of Electric Pricing and Rate Administration.
And have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision direct testimony of 18 pages that was previously filed with the Commission in this docket?
I have.
Do you have any changes or additions to your pre-filed direct testimony?
I do not.
So if I ask you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I move that the pre-filed direct testimony of Alan Rooks be read into the record as if given orally from the stand, with the exception of the testimony from page 16, line 4 to page 17, line 13, and the testimony on page 18, lines 6 through 8. Again, this testimony is not being entered into the record in this phase of the proceeding in compliance with Commission Order 2019-229.
Okay, Mr. Rooks' pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand, with the exception of the deletions, that redactions that were mentioned by counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rooks, have you also prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision 12 exhibits labeled as exhibit number AWR1 through AWR2 that were previously filed, AWR1 through AWR12 that were previously filed with the Commission as attachments to your pre-filed direct testimony in this docket?
I have.
Do you have any changes or additions to your exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I would also move into the record as the next hearing composite exhibit the 12 exhibits attached to Mr. Rooks' direct testimony and labeled as exhibit numbers AWR1 through AWR12.
Mr. Rooks, exhibits AWR1 through 12 will be entered as composite exhibit number 6.
And just for clarity, we are not moving into the record the remaining 5 exhibits that were attached to Mr. Rooks' pre-filed direct testimony in this phase of the proceeding in compliance with the Commission Order 2019-229.
Noted.
Mr. Rooks, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
I have.
Would you please share that with us at this time?
Good morning, Chairman Randall, and members of the Commission. The purpose of my testimony is to provide the company's currently approved electric fuel factors, actual and projected data on base fuel costs, variable environmental and avoided capacity costs, and distributed energy resource avoided and incremental costs and collection for the period January 1, 2018 through April 30th, 2020. And the proposed base fuel, variable environmental and avoided capacity, DER avoided, DER incremental, and total fuel cost factors for retail customers for the period May 2019 through April 2020. My Exhibits 1 and 2 present the detailed calculations of actual and projected base fuel costs and recovery for the period January 1, 2018 through April 30th, 2020. Exhibit 3 presents the demand allocation factors for variable environmental, avoided capacity, and DER program costs. Exhibits 4 and 5 present the detailed calculations of variable environmental and avoided capacity costs and recovery for the period January 1st, 2018 through April 30th, 2020. Exhibits 6 and 7 present the detailed calculations of actual and projected DER avoided costs and recovery for the period January 1, 2018 through April 30th, 2020. And Exhibits 8 and 9 present the detailed calculations of actual and projected DER incremental costs and the calculation of a per account monthly component for recovery, which will not exceed the annual maximums set forth by South Carolina Code annotated Section 5839-150. Exhibit 10 presents the company's proposed base fuel component in this proceeding, and Exhibit 11 presents the company's proposed total fuel cost factors for the period May 2019 through April 2020. Yesterday, the company entered into a stipulation with the ORS and the South Carolina Energy Users Committee in this proceeding. The company supports all aspects of the stipulation. If approved, and as proposed in my direct testimony, the total fuel cost factors per kilowatt hour by retail class under the settlement agreement would be 2.555 cents per kilowatt hour for residential, 2.547 cents per kilowatt hour for small general service, 2.532 cents per kilowatt hour for medium general service, 2.502 cents per kilowatt hour for large general service, and 2.451 cents per kilowatt hour for lighting. The monthly per account DER incremental charge by retail class would be $1 for residential customers, $5.19 for small and medium general service customers, and $100 for large general service customers. The impact of the company's combined proposals for fuel and DSM cost recovery, if approved, would be a decrease of 56 cents from current rates on an average monthly bill for a residential customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours. The company requests that these factors and charges be effective for all customer classes for bills rendered on and after the first billing cycle of May 2019 and continuing through the billing month of April 2020. Additionally, the company respectfully requests that the Commission approve the fuel tariff sheet as presented in my direct testimony and Attachment A to the stipulation. The company also respectfully requests that the Commission issue an order finding that SCE&G's fuel purchasing practices, plant operations, and fuel inventory management were reasonable and prudent. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Rooks. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Raftery, and Mr. Rooks are available for cross-examination and questioning by the commissioners.
Thank you. Any cross for this panel? Commissioners. Mr. Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Raftery, on page 9 of your pre-file direct testimony, just a second to get there, you indicate that the 2% cap should be reached by April 2019. In other words, now, this month. Has that happened, or is the forecast still on track? Where are you in regards to that?
So we are on track. 2 years ago, I've been mentioning the fact that we thought we'd hit the cap the first quarter or the second quarter of this year, and I missed it by a week. So I apologize for that. But the at the end of March 31st, we had achieved 84.597 megawatts, I apologize, of net energy metering applications. So about 73 are interconnected, 73 megawatts. About 7 megawatts were approved, and about 5 megawatts are pending application. So what I set up in this testimony in regards to applications coming through the month of April up through May 3rd still holds true.
So with the applications you have on that you've received, that will hit it.
It will, and one thing to recognize is that some of the applications that are approved or some of the applications that are pending won't ultimately get built. That just naturally happens, that some are removed. That's why we suggested going a month beyond when we would hit the cap, just to kind of give ourselves some cushion. And it was the approach that we used for the performance-based incentives that were initially offered. You know, that had a cap, I think, of about 9.5 megawatts, and we went a bit beyond so that it could ease back. I think our customers appreciated that approach. The solar industry appreciated that approach. They appreciate a date certain versus going to a website and looking every day to see whether the cap was met or not.
Right. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Raftery, following up on what you and Commissioner Whitfield discussed, I've noticed that most of the rural areas are the place where the solar farms are. And, of course, the load is not that great. Could you tell me what has to happen for you to be able to accept the solar load on the grid?
So the solar farms traditionally are in more rural areas. The main reason for that it is a land lease. Much lower land lease. Land's not as arguably as valuable. Often that land is cleared for farming, and from a solar lease they can make twice as much as if they leased it out to a farmer. All of those projects go through a fairly intensive study process. The commission approved, I think in 2016, it might have been 15, the state's small generator interconnection process. So they go into a queue, they're studied to the extent that there are facility needs, upgrades. Those are costs that are borne by the solar developers, so those costs aren't socialized amongst the ratepayers. Then it goes through a process of making milestone deposit payments, the utility constructing their facilities, the solar developer constructing their facilities, and ultimately getting interconnected. But in that study process, it's understood what the power flows would be and how much solar the company could accept on that circuit. So sometimes it's interconnected to the distribution system. Sometimes it's interconnected to the transmission system. So it's just a matter of knowing what load are on those lines, how large the solar farm is itself, and whether or not there are other solar farms on the system at that location.
And then the company's annual planning, solar is a part of the generation planning process.
It sure is, yeah. You'll see it represented in the integrated resource plan.
Thank you very much. That helps me understand a little more about what's happening. Mr. Rooks.
Yes, sir.
You just told us with the company maintaining the base fuel rate of 2.451 per kilowatt hour. What do you anticipate the U.S. Treasury note to be during this 3-year period?
Well, certainly, I don't have a crystal ball and can't forecast interest rates, but I would note that in examining the testimony that the interest rate for January of 18, which was the only month in the review period where we applied carrying costs, was right at 3%. And then what we used at January of this year, all in with the 3-year Treasury plus 65, was about 3.1%. So I would say, based on those two observations, probably somewhere in that 3% range would be the all-in annualized carrying cost rate.
Okay, those anticipations that were part of what you used to set the kilowatt rate?
Yes, sir. We used the January 2019 rate in our forecast, which was about 3.1%, because that was the best information we had at the time of preparing the testimony.
I noted also in your testimony that I believe it was about $35 million undercollected that was carried over.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Commissioner Hamilton, they want you to get a little closer to that microphone, so we want you to be worldwide on this live stream.
I want to be with them. On the $35 million, why did the company decide to carry this amount over?
Well, Commissioner, we felt at this time it was the company's view that stability of rates was going to be important to customers, and it's important to us. So we felt at this time that this was the appropriate action to take. We'll monitor that under collection over time. We're in constant communication with ORS, and we file monthly reports with the Commission. And I would say that we'll keep a close eye on that, and if commodity costs increase greatly or something else were to come about, we would probably bring that back to the Commission's attention. But we feel at this time that this is a reasonable proposal to make, to keep rates the same or keep them right about where they are for that particular factor. And ORS has agreed with that approach as well in the stipulation. So we feel like this is a good approach to take at this time.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. I appreciate your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sir, Commissioner Howard.
Mr. Rafferty, I got a curiosity question. On I-26, right before Orangeburg, there's a solar farm on the westbound side, like at mile marker 144. Are you familiar with that?
I've seen it, and I've wondered if it's a farm that's interconnected to our system. I don't know the answer.
That was one of my questions. The other question was, how many megawatt is that facility? I mean, do you know? I mean, by looking at the size of it, I was just curious.
Yeah, I would guess maybe 5 or 6 megawatts. So a megawatt consumes about 5 acres. So you're looking at that lot. It might be I don't know, maybe 40 acres. Maybe it's 5 megawatts.
Yeah, I was curious about that, and it had a sign on it, ALDER, ALDER Energy. Yep. I wasn't familiar with them. Are you familiar with them?
Yes, certainly. ALDER has been in the state for a number of years. Ever when Act 236 started, ALDER Energy, they're out of Charleston. They've been around. They've predominantly been residential and some commercial, and then sometimes with community solar farms, they'll subcontract some of the work out. So I don't believe ALDER owns that farm. I could be wrong. They likely did some work on it and got their sign up on it.
You have a chart on the top of page 13 segmenting low-income accounts of 160 with a megawatt capacity point 0.97. Will you explain that to me?
Sure. So our community solar program in total is about 16 megawatts. We thought, and it's available for residential customers, churches, schools, and municipalities. You might recall Act 236 wanted something special for the tax-exempt customers, so that's why, in part, this program was created. We recognized that the low-income segment might be overlooked in residential rooftop. They might not own their home. Maybe the roof wasn't suitable, or maybe they just didn't have the finances to do it. Therefore, we wanted to make sure that part of our community solar farm solely served the low-income segment. So we carved out 1 megawatt of the 16 megawatts that is only available to low-income customers. And through those partnerships that I mentioned in my summary, with about 8 customer assistance agencies across the state, they help to identify customers that meet income poverty guidelines. They will suggest or recommend that they participate in our community solar program. They route them to a team that will then do a free home energy checkup. So it's kind of it's often a need to pay a bill turned into an energy efficiency opportunity, then turned into a renewable opportunity. So provided that they do the home energy checkup and they fully qualify, they then will be able to participate in this community solar program. And I think We have about 40 customers on the wait list, and there's always kind of churn to it as customers leave the service territory or final bill, someone else comes on.
Well, could it be feasible for mobile homes to have solar panels?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. No, I mean, well, it's feasible. I mean, technically, it's feasible. The question is whether or not they would own them, and is the roof suitable for it? Yeah, more likely they could have some ground mount, solar panels next to the mobile home.
Do you do energy audits on mobile homes?
Yeah, we absolutely do. Yes.
Okay. I think that's it. Oh, now the other question is there a difference between low-income users and low-energy users?
No, for this definition, I think it's 200% of the income poverty guidelines. So it's not a low energy use definition used in community solar.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rafferty, you discussed the company's issuance of a RFP for solar with battery storage on page 16. Has it become more economical to use battery storage?
It has. I think that a year ago we were very interested in solar and storage together. There are some advantages of doing that because based off the configuration, there might be some tax credits available to energy storage, just like there is for solar. But quite honestly, we're saturated with solar. We have over 1,000 megawatts of solar contracted for. That puts us ahead of our neighboring peers. We have over 20% of our peak in solar. And last year we experienced some impacts to the system with the solar, most notably flicker, when the lights flicker. So there's been a good amount of work on the solar developers have had to change their inverter programming logic and have had to get it certified. That's kind of drawn us away from issuing that RFP that I mentioned last year. But I think the bigger opportunity this year is to focus on energy storage, like you mentioned, because it can provide grid services standalone without solar.
Do you see the cost of the battery storage capacity actually coming down going forward?
Yep. So you could find a report to support anything you want, whatever ultimately what you want to say. It's been my experience since 2014 that solar prices seem to decline about 10% every year. You could find some that would say they're coming down less or more, but traditionally it's about 10% every year. Energy storage, when you look at it, most people predict it to follow a similar price decline curve, but I would half that price. Maybe they'll come down 5% year over year.
Does the capacity to store more solar help smooth out the peaks?
It can. It certainly can. And so the exploration that we are considering is maybe taking some of that evening, nighttime generation, baseload generation, and serving the morning peaks, especially in the winter. And then in the summer, maybe taking some of that excess solar generation during the day, storing it and serving the evening peaks. Because once you get to a certain point, like 1,000 megawatts, your your system peak is no longer within the solar profile. It's pushed all the way to 8 o'clock, and the sun just doesn't shine at 8 o'clock. So energy storage might help us in that summer perspective.
I commend you for your efforts in that regard, and I think that it makes economic good sense to pursue it, particularly as the costs are dropping going forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, a couple of questions. For the 5-member household family somewhere in District 6 that has an average household income between $30,000 and $40,000, who probably would be unable to afford rooftop solar and may not qualify or may not have the benefit of taking advantage of a community solar program. How does the advancement in solar energy benefit them?
I think you ruled out rooftop solar, and I understand that and agree. I think some companies might say there's a lease offering, but you're putting rooftop solar off to the side. I think you also put community solar off to the side. And I would like to say we have a community solar program, and although there's a wait list, it's small, so I think that's an opportunity for that family to get involved. Absent, doing something at the customer side or participating in a community solar program. Actually, even more importantly, I'd want to talk about energy efficiency. It's better to save the need for a kilowatt hour than to have to produce it. But to answer your question about how does solar benefit them, it's a clean energy resource in the state.
Okay, so essentially, it's environmental friendly.
Correct.
Okay, so more of an intangible to their bank account, arguably, but at least it's clean energy. You talked about the low income portion of the community solar. I just want to make sure I understand how that benefits that low income person. How does it benefit their bill? Is a portion of their bill reduced, or are they given some type of credit? What happens to a person that's on that, or a family that's on that low income program?
That's a great question, and there's a financial impact that's twofold. The first is that they will have received a free home energy checkup. That's valued at $250. I mean, that's about the price for what those services are. They receive directly leave behinds to include LED light bulbs, hot water heater wraps, piping, air filters, a number of different things. To include mobile homes, we do belly board insulation. So they'll see a benefit from those energy efficiency measures and that education that, according to some estimates, is at least $100 benefit on their bills. If they take advantage, those leave behinds when they put them in, as well as the education, they'll save about $100 on their bill annually. And then the second part is the community solar program. Specifically for the low income, they just get a benefit for their portion of the farm on a pro rata share for what the energy is produced. A normal residential customer has to pay to participate, and it's a charge on their bill, but the credit that they receive, just like the low income, is more than offsets the participation fee. Low income, they don't have the subscription charge like a normal residential customer has.
Do you have any numbers on that credit? What does that credit look like?
It's just under $10 a month. It turns into about $100 per year. So the energy efficiency benefit and then the renewable energy benefit from that combined program turns out to be $200 plus or minus annually.
Okay. So I want to make sure I got my numbers right. So that the energy efficiency review is valued as about $250.
Yes.
Right. And then the credit is valued at about $100.
The billing impacts as a result of those, we call them measures that are put into place, equates, and the education turns out to be about $100 per house per year.
So combined, we're talking about $350, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. It's $100 from what they do from an energy efficiency perspective, and then $100 from a community solar perspective on their bill. So overall, their bills for the year would come down by $200.
Okay, and all they have to do is apply and get accepted.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners. Anything else? Just wanted to follow up one thing, Mr. Raftery. When you were talking with Commissioner Irvin about energy storage, and then you said earlier about electric vehicle charging stations and that kind of thing. Are there projections that you have on how the proliferation of electric vehicles is going to impact demand, in the short term, midterm, long term?
Not as I sit here on the stand that I could share any of those projections. I think Chairman Randall, you might be aware that many of the global automobile manufacturers are committing to all electric fleets, and pretty much, I'm not sure there's a manufacturer out there, absent maybe one or two, that hasn't committed to electric vehicles. But we have a team that stays on top of those trends and is evaluating some charging systems that we already have on our system and what the impact is to that circuit, and how it might be thoughtfully rolled out from charging stations across the grid and charging stations in people's homes, so that ultimately not only do the customers benefit, but there's some benefit to the grid as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else, commissioners? Any redirect? Okay, gentlemen, thank you for your testimony, and you may step down and be excused. We're going to take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll continue.